Repeat of a statement made in the House of Commons today. Post Office compensation for the Horizon scandal. Lord Callanan.
My Lords, with the leave of the House, I will now repeat a statement made by my honourable friend, Minister Scully, in another place. With your permission, sir, I would like to make a statement on the latest steps that the Government is taking to ensure that swift and fair compensation is made available to postmasters impacted by the Horizon IT scandal. This House is well aware of the terrible impact felt by many postmasters affected by issues with the Post Office's Horizon IT system, which began over 20 years ago. These distressing consequences have been widely documented both in the courts, in the 2019 group litigation order judgments, and by the more recent Court of Appeal judgments, as well as in the media. I would like to pay tribute to colleagues on both sides of the House who have supported postmasters in their efforts to expose the truth and to see justice done. Today, I would like to take the opportunity to update the House on the latest steps that the Government is taking to ensure that fair compensation is paid to people impacted by the Horizon IT scandal. As you all know, the members of the GLO performed a great public service by bringing the case in 2019, which exposed the scandal. That is why I was pleased that the Chancellor announced in March this year that further funding is being made available to ensure that they receive similar levels of compensation to that which is available to their non-GLO peers. Today, I can update the House that the Government intends to make an interim payment of compensation to eligible members of the GLO who are not already covered by other compensation support, totalling £19.5 million. Together with the share of the December 2019 settlement that we understand was distributed to the GLO postmasters, this brings the total of compensation to about £30 million. Postmasters will be contacted in the coming weeks to submit an application, after which we aim to distribute the funds within a few weeks of receiving their application. I hope this will go some way in helping many postmasters who have and still are facing hardships. In parallel, we are continuing to work at pace on delivering the final compensation scheme for the GLO. I can confirm that we will be appointing Freeths to access the data and methodology they developed in relation to the distribution of the 2019 settlement. Freeths represented the GLO claimants and have vital knowledge and expertise based on their involvement in the case. This will allow us to work at pace on the design of a scheme with the JFSA and Freeths to give those in the GLO similar compensation to their non-GLO peers. As promised in March, we will informally consult with members of the GLO about the proposed scheme's operations. I'm also pleased to announce that members of the GLO group will be able to claim reasonable legal fees as part of participating in the compensation scheme. I hope this will allay any concerns that they might have about meeting the costs of seeking legal advice and support when applying to the scheme. Turning now to progress on compensation for overturned criminal convictions, I am pleased to report to the House that interim payments are progressing well. As of the 27th of June, there have been 75 overturned convictions, with the most recent convictions being overturned in recent weeks. The Post Office has received 73 applications for interim payments, including several new applications in recent weeks. 67 offers have been accepted by claimants, with 66 payments totalling nearly £7 million paid out in compensation so far. This marks significant progress, with 9 additional interim payments made to postmasters since I updated the Bayes Select Committee on the 11th of January 2022. I am pleased that these interim payments have helped to deliver an early down payment on the compensation due to affected postmasters in advance of full and final compensation packages being agreed. For those postmasters with an overturned conviction who have already submitted quantified claims, I can share that we are working with Post Office to agree part payments of agreed elements of claims, such as loss of earnings, wherever possible, and will continue to do so with additional claims which are submitted. Taking this step should enable us to avoid undue delays by awarding partial compensation while outstanding matters are resolved. I acknowledge that one area where it has been challenging to agree compensation is non-pecuniary damages. some of which reflect the wider impact on postmasters' lives that these wrongful convictions have had. These include compensation for the loss of their liberty or impacts on their mental health. A number of the postmasters have agreed to refer this issue to the process of early neutral evaluation to be conducted by former Supreme Court Judge Lord Dyson. It is hoped that this evaluation will facilitate the resolution of these issues. Government stands ready to support the delivery of the early neutral evaluation process and is keen to ensure that the outcomes of this process enable swift compensation. I urge all postmasters with a Horizon-related conviction to continue to come forward to seek to have these overturned. They are being contacted individually by the CCRC and other relevant bodies to encourage them to do so. In addition to the progress on compensation for those with overturned criminal convictions, good progress has been made on delivering compensation for those in the historical shortfall scheme. As of the 23rd of June, 65% of eligible claimants have now received an offer, meaning £29 million has now been offered, and that 444 further postmasters have been offered compensation since my last update to the House. I would like to thank the independent panels for their diligent work in progressing these cases. As I have said previously, I have set the Post Office the ambition to make 100% of HSS offers by the end of the calendar year, and the Government is working closely with Post Office to achieve this. As I have said before, it is important, in addition to providing compensation, that we learn lessons so that something similar can never happen again. And that is why the Government has set up the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry and put it on a statutory footing to ensure that it has all the powers that it needs to investigate what happened, establish the facts and make recommendations for the future. We are cooperating fully with the inquiry to ensure that the facts of what happened are established and lessons learned.
My Lords, can I start by thanking the Noble Lord the Minister for repeating the statement and anticipation in answering our questions. The Noble Lord the Minister has often been on the right side of this debate, and I thank him for that. The biggest and most frequent criticisms that your Lordship's House has had are threefold, and some of those have been answered. The time taken to deliver compensation, who gets it, and the levels and the amounts. Now, many of those have now been resolved over previous months and with this statement. March's announcement that 555 sub-postmasters would receive compensation they were entitled to was welcome. And as is today's further announcement confirming £19.5 million interim compensation package. However, it is frustrating that it's taken so long to reach this point when it has been clear and obvious for many years what was needed to be done. I'm sure we can all agree the victims of this scandal have been made to endure the stressful uncertainty for far too long. Yeah. It's clear that the positive resolution we've now reached is thanks to the tireless work of campaigners both inside and outside this place. Now that includes, as ever in this place, Lord Arbuthnot. In the other place, Kevin Jones. Both Lord Arbuthnot and Kevin Jones both have done a tremendous job in fighting this injustice. And to be fair, the Noble Lord the Minister here and Minister Scully have acted where their predecessors have failed to. We all know the history of this case, so I will not rehearse the arguments. It is well documented both here in Parliament and across the media. We can all hope that this sad episode drives lasting change. The shame of this miscarriage will, and rightly will, be felt across government for many years to come. I do, however, have a few questions for the Minister, some he has touched on and some looking for a bit more detail. As such, can the Minister provide a timescale for when all payments will be made? Will the Minister confirm that the compensation will not affect the Post Office's core funding the day-to-day operations or the viability of it in any way, given the vital role that the Post Office performs in many, if not all, of our communities. The Minister knows that we have called across this House for those involved to be held accountable. Can he update the House? He has a little bit on the investigations that are ongoing, but specifically on Fujitsu and others involved in the technology that led to this failure. Have Fujitsu been sanctioned? Have any of their other contracts been re-evaluated, been checked or been looked at? But not just those external to government. The Minister has previously committed to hold those responsible account, and by that I mean the Post Office Board. Can the Government confirm that the inquiry will extend to the directors of the Post Office, including those who were placed there by the Department, those who wrongly sanctioned legal action? Will affected postmasters who have lost thousands in legal costs, and this is will the affected postmasters who have lost thousands in legal costs, this is far from all they have lost, and the Minister touched on the non-pecuniary damages. I just wonder if he could say a little bit more, because the financials are being restored, but as he said, and as the statement says, many people were affected in many other ways which weren't just financial. Last year's historic shortfall scheme from the non-GLO postmasters included the interim payments, which are needed urgently both for those living in poverty and to start bringing a closure to the ordeal. Now, I think the Minister said he expected payments to start within 2 weeks, but can the Minister confirm that this will be the case, and will that cover all of those affected? So just taking a step back, in his High Court judgment on the Horizon IT systems case, Justice Fraser stated that the denials by the Post Office, in his words, amounted to the 21st century equivalent of maintaining that the earth is flat. He also went on in his judgment into this scheme, stating the Post Office showed the most dreadful complacency and a total lack of interest in investigating these serious issues. Will the Post Office now introduce an independent component when conducting prosecutions? So if there are any future prosecutions in any other areas, there will be an independent component before taking the next stage. This whole ordeal around the wrongful prosecution of post submasters has caused a huge waste of public funds and time, as well as causing a huge deal of mental anguish to those wrongfully prosecuted. Can the Government ensure that such huge levels of carelessness and complacency is never repeated, so that we can avoid further waste of public funds, as well as avoiding the stress caused by this ordeal? All sides of this House are rightly united and outraged at what the sub-postmasters and postmistresses experienced and the injustices they suffered for almost 25 years. Lives have been unjustly destroyed and jobs lost, some imprisoned, others losing their business, with many having the prospect, as well as some having convictions hanging over them. But saddest of all is that some did not live to see the justice that is finally now being restored.
My Lords, I want to start by thanking the Noble Lord the Minister for his commitment on this issue and for his statement here today. As he knows, when I was first involved in this as a member of the Welsh Assembly back in the early 2000s, even then it was obvious there was something very seriously wrong. How could I be in a crowded room in a pub with so many people with their families, who have been regarded as pillars of the community, the sort of people who went and looked for pensioners who hadn't come in to collect their pension to check that they were all right. And I was being asked to believe by the post office that these people had taken their money. And that was definitely something which jarred with me at the time. So the big question, my lords, is how has this been allowed to take so long? And how was it covered up for so long? And what will happen to those people, both within the post office and Fujitsu, who knew that they were covering up problems? I realise that there will have been people who were doing so without realising that they were involved in a cover-up, but though there were many who knew. And we must also consider the impact on the post office as an institution, which had previously been one of the most trusted British institutions. I have some questions, some of which the Noble Lord has already addressed, but I have a few questions on the statement today. First of all, I welcome the interim payment that is announced, payments that are announced, but the amount of money sounds relatively modest, given the length of time it has taken to get this place. It is interim, but that £19.5 million, can the Noble Lord the Minister tell us how many people that money will be going to, so we can get some sort of measure of how much they will be receiving in the interim? There is reference in the statement to postmasters being contacted in the coming weeks and so on. Can the Noble Lord the Minister give us a target date by which he hopes the interim payments will be made? Because we have had so much delay here. And finally, because I realise that time is short, there have been 75 overturned convictions. Are there more in the process at the moment? Will we expect there to be other overturned convictions? And what will the government be doing in terms of payments to those who have already died? Because many of the people involved in this process, because it's taken more than 2 decades, are now very elderly. And some of those people who died, unfortunately, did so as a result of suicide because of the situation they were placed in. So what plans does the government have to compensate those families of those who died and those families who stumped up large amounts of money to avoid their relatives going bankrupt as a result of misplaced allegations?
Well, I thank Lord McNichol and Baroness Randerson for their statements and their questions. Starting with Lord McNichol, let me say, he knows already that I totally share his frustration, and I think his statement about stressful uncertainty for the postmasters sums up the issue very well, and I totally agree with the Noble Lord. Also very happy to join him in paying tribute to, in particular, Lord Arbuthnot and Kevin Jones, but I know there are a number of other parliamentarians on all sides who have been involved with this. They are truly a tribute to parliamentarians who get criticised for a lot of things, but it can really show when there are scandals such as this, the role that members of both houses can play in bringing public attention to these, and government attention to these matters. With regard to the questions that Noble Lord posed, Baroness Randerson also asked about the overall timescale. The ambition is that the ambition is that all offers will have been made by the end of the year. The GLO interim payments will be made within weeks. The Noble Lord asked me for an assurance that the core funding of the Post Office is unaffected, and I can give him that assurance. He raised the issue of the directors of the Post Office. Indeed, they can be held to account by the inquiry, as indeed can ministers and as indeed can officials who were involved in this. We're determined that there will be no hiding place for those who contributed to this scandal. He asked me about further private prosecutions, and right at the start of this scandal, when I spoke to the Chief Executive of the Post Office, he assured me that they had no plans to do any more private prosecutions, and I'd be very, very surprised if they went back on that, given the trouble that this has got them into. Noble Lord also referred to Post Office complacency. That may have been the case in the past, but I think the new leadership under Nick Reid are really producing a change in the culture and some real improvements in the service that the Post Office is offering. Baroness Randerson referred to cover-ups, and I'm sure there probably were, but of course that's a matter for the inquiry to establish. She asked me how many people were receiving compensation. The 19.5 million interim payments goes to all members of the GLO scheme, so there are about 500 of them. And I can also confirm to the noble lady that where some of those members have sadly died, we are engaging with their next of kin and with their estates on seeking the appropriate levels of compensation.
My Lords, again, my noble friend comes before this House with good news, and I'm truly grateful to that. We look forward to the day when the finalisation of the compensation scheme can be completed, and we hope that it is earlier so that sub-postmasters can have truly substantial payments. My Lords, as the public inquiry goes through the process of considering the responsibility of Fujitsu and Post Office directors and others, can my noble friend the Minister assure your Lordships that the inevitable delay arising out of the public inquiry will not cause to be legally time-barred any redress that might be needed to be taken in relation to those people who are at fault?
I can give my noble friend a very quick answer to that, and the answer is yes, I can give Noble Lord that assurance, and once again pay tribute to the work that he has done in exposing this scandal.
My Lords, I thank the Minister for repeating the statement, and my apologies for having briefly left the chamber during his doing so. And can I pay tribute to the noble Lord Arbuthnot and others for the work they have done in bringing this scandal to public attention. And my question arises, in fact, in the light of the previous question, which is about the public inquiry. Can the Minister tell the House how long it might take? For the obvious reason, which is the sooner the public inquiry is completed, whatever its outcome, the sooner we can be reassured that a scandal of this kind can never happen again.
I can't give the Noble Lord a timescale. Obviously, we wanted to conclude it as quickly as possible, but it needs to be thorough and it needs to go into all of the facts. And of course, it's in the hands of the chairman of the inquiry to determine exactly how long it should take.
My Lords, we're all very grateful to my noble friend, as well as to my noble friend Lord Arbuthnot. He and Mr. Scully have pursued this with vigour, and they deserve our thanks. But, my Lords, these people who have gone through hell are being compensated, but there is no compensation that can truly be adequate. And an idea has occurred to me, which I would commend to him. Could these people, who have been exonerated and compensated, be issued with a medal for meritorious service through the Post Office?
I think that's an interesting idea. I will take that back and discuss it with officials.
My Lords, I very much welcome the Minister's statement, in particular the announcement of the public inquiry, but it's in the nature of public inquiries, however however speedy they are intended, they have an uncanny knack of going on for several years. So can the Minister confirm that both the Post Office and their sponsoring department, albeit not on an interim basis, have conducted internal inquiries, the better to learn the lessons now?
Well, I mean, of course, officials and I'm sure ministers are very keen to learn the lessons, but I really do think the inquiry is the best place to fully go into all of these matters which took place, as I said, over decades, and they will get to the bottom of it, and the appropriate individuals will be held responsible.
My Lords, can I congratulate my noble friend on the brilliant job which he's done on this, but can he help me on the question of Fujitsu? We don't need a public inquiry to tell us that the software was deficient. We have reports of whistleblowers who said that they knew that the software was deficient. So why is the taxpayer having to pick up the bill for this? And why are they not being forced to pay up? And if they're not prepared to be forced to pay up, why on earth are we allowing them to do any work for any government or anyone else where we have any influence?
As my noble friend knows, I do have considerable sympathy for the points that he has made, which on the face of it do seem to be very obvious, but I think we really do need to wait for the inquiry to positively establish the facts and lay it all out in stark detail before considering what further steps to take.
My Lords, I had the honour of entering this House at the same time as Lord Arbuthnot. We've been friends for many years, and I'd like to also congratulate him on his tenacity and his effectiveness. It has been outstanding, and I think so many people around the country are grateful to him. I was intrigued by what Lady Ranson was talking about, the Welsh pub, because I've consistently tried to personalise this by mentioning my friend Rita Threlfall at every occasion, because this is about individuals and it's about their families. It's not about 555, which almost means nothing. And I agree entirely that no amount of money can actually restore the dignity. So I agree entirely that my noble friend and Minister Scully have done their best. I actually don't think it's enough, and my words at the end were going to be exactly the words of which have just been mentioned. I don't understand why Fujitsu are not paying their way for this. I need to understand, if the Minister could understand why, or explain to me why Fujitsu are not financially responsible for this and why, as was said, the taxpayer is paying. Please explain it.
Again, I have considerable sympathy for the points that my noble friend is making. But so far, Fujitsu have not been found guilty of any fraud or other crime related to this matter, and they are cooperating in full with the inquiry, as we would expect of them. So I realise that this is uncomfortable for the House, but I really do think we should wait for the results of the inquiry to set out in stark detail exactly where the failings were.
My Lords, I associate myself with the tributes paid to my noble friend Lord Arbuthnot and Paul Scully in the other place, and also with the congratulations to the government on bringing forward payments at last, at least to many of them. Could I just ask my noble friend for reassurance? The statement talks about reimbursing reasonable costs of legal action. I understand that going forward, because we have to guard against egregious costs being imposed. But for those who have already had to take legal action, can my noble friend assure the House that there will be full recompense for all the legal expenses that they have had to go to, in addition to which there will also be compensation for the suffering that they have clearly been through as well?
If my noble friend is talking about the GLO legal action, then of course the costs of that were funded, and the lawyers were not paid by the litigants themselves. A lot of the compensation did go to pay the legal fees, which is part of the problem with the GLO scheme.
Lords, I hope the House will allow me the flexibility to take advantage of the fact that we have a few moments left in this exchange. But on the terms of reference of the inquiry, and forgive me for not knowing the detail of them, but will they encompass the role of the judiciary, which after all succeeded in sentencing an enormous number of postmasters to prison and with criminal sentences, and will that be a feature of the inquiry when it is held to investigate how that was possible?
Very good point.
The inquiry can cover all relevant matters. Of course, the role of the judiciary was examined and is being examined in the cases that are proceeding through the courts at the moment, and the convictions being overturned. And I'm sure all those members of the judiciary who are still in their posts will be paying close attention to those cases. But of course, to be fair, they can only adjudge a case on the evidence that is presented to them. But I'm sure they will want to take careful account of any technical evidence that was given in these various cases, and perhaps treat it with a bit more scepticism in the future.
My Lords, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his reception of my suggestion. It occurs to me that if we could have a public ceremony in, say, Westminster Hall, where these people were publicly recognised and given a medal, it really would do something for their morale.
As I said, it's an interesting proposition, and we'll certainly have a look at it.
Motion for debate. The 2022 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting